circumstance. Red is go. Okay. Welcome back to Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. And we are, having had a great introduction to the Natural Resources Board's Act 250 report, we are now going to pivot to housing and begin to talk about what will be our committee bill on housing this year, now affectionately named Be Home, for something for everyone. What is
the
it?
Bringing Everyone Home bill.
Bringing Everyone Home bill. So this is basically Home Bill 2. Maybe we could make a movie and actually create some earned income for Vermont. This would be great. Anyway, so we welcome to our chair, our wonderful Ledge Counsel, Ellen Schakowsky, and to walk us through what is the beginning. I just want everyone to be aware that this is a right. And Keisha may have some frame up. Do you have some frame up comments before Ellen starts?
After just took a bite of something.
I know, sorry.
I'll do a moment of frame up. Ellen Schakowsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. So I think it has been posted, but it's currently known as 24-0067. It does not have an S number yet because it is a committee bill.
Right.
So, and it is draft 3.1 because it is a committee bill. The prior drafts were internal, so you haven't seen them. This is the first public draft of this bill. It's 3.1.
Is that 0067?
Yes.
Okay. Draft 3.1?
3.1.
And sure,
dated today.
Are we gonna, yeah. And did you send that to Magali?
I did send it to Magali. I don't know if it's been posted yet.
Okay.
Just posting it now.
So, Keisha, do you want to do a framing thought for us as we begin this conversation?
Sure. I think the ultimate intent, as we know in the second year of the biennium, we just have less time, and we want to give our beleaguered Ledge Counsel, our talented and beleaguered Ledge Counsel staff, the opportunity to think through some of the thornier pieces for longer, and know who the stakeholders are that they would get more information from in the administration, et cetera.
Right. I'm just pulling this up.
This takes ideas that I've heard percolate in the committee and from these study groups, and it really just is half placeholders at this point and ideas that we've wanted to explore, such as the appeals bond. You'll now see some of those similar ideas reflected in the House bill that they're going to be introducing on Friday, in the governor's proposal, but that's a bit of happenstance at this point, because when we hear the House bill and the governor's proposal, we'll then decide if we want to bring more of those ideas on board. So this is, again, just a start, and things that have come to me from either neighbors and some of your constituents, like a guy trying to build in Montpelier, or things that have just come through committee discussion.
Okay, great. Then I was trying to pull it up so I could follow along, because I'm not sure, it would be nice to see Keisha and not have to obliterate her with how would you like to start?
Well, and so my testimony today was a surprise. So I forgot my iPad at home. I'm having a rough morning.
Oh no.
So
but at least you got here. That's
I walked here, and so
good exercise.
It was great exercise.
And we still have power.
We do have power. Yeah.
So I mean, and we have each other.
And the river fish. Yes,
Well,
and
I feel
my
like I walked here this morning, too. It took
nylon's
me just
finally
about
dried.
long.
So
Yeah.
Can I say one more thing as we all get settled? I have been trying to think about my North Star a lot in this process, and if others want to share their North Star as well. I think what I've landed on is that I want us to measure the success of this bill against whether Vermonters have more choice, more dignity, and more safety from the provisions of this bill. And so I called it Bringing Everyone Home because it's about climate refugees. It's about seniors who want to live near their grandkids. It's about, young people who want to move back to the state and really make their lives here. It's about bringing people home to Vermont. And to me, we need choice, dignity, and safety in order to do that.
And more housing. Choice, dignity, and just more housing.
The choice
And,
part is
yeah.
really the just more is better part, I think, yeah.
Well, you've got your, the tenant that was in here with the landlord from hell, and they can't move because there's no place to go.
Right.
That's
So,
no dignity.
and to follow up on Keisha's North Star, we're gonna hear from individual Vermonters about some of the challenges they face. We have one from Cavendish that just, or from Weathersfield. Anyway, so we're gonna hear from a bunch of individual voices, and if you have people you think would lend insight to this challenge, please let us know. So, Ellen.
Has it been posted?
I can't see it yet, but that's because
Great.
I don't know how to refresh.
And as I did just mention, I don't have my iPad, and so if you
Oh,
want-
here you are. Yes, it's now posted.
Okay.
And if you, would
So
you like to see mine?
No, I have it in print, but if
Oh.
you wanted to see it on the screen, I think we'll need Magali's help with that. If you want it up on the screen, or do you want to keep?
Well, Ann and I can share, and Randy and,
They all have one. I can go get mine.
no, it's okay.
Who's
You,
charging?
me. You got,
Mine's not
we're all
showing
set.
up.
You're
Is
right,
it
I have
in
to-
sponsored by committee or is
It-
it
no,
in
it- no.
committee?
It says
Probably
under Ellen
under my
Tchaikovsky,
name.
it has the draft.
Oh, how do I find
So just
For today's
refresh
date.
and pull up. Because I think it would be better to see Keisha and as we go through
Okay,
this.
so we're not gonna put it on the screen. Okay,
I am ready if necessary.
great.
Do you guys
it?
want
Do
to
I
run
put
this?
your name up here? Up here?
Keisha, would it help you to
Slide
see it
down
on
to
the
the
screen, or are you okay with it on the
It
computer?
would help me to see it on the screen. I'm trying to pull it
Okay,
up now, but my computer is just low on battery, not,
Okay,
yeah.
so let's pull it up.
Okay.
Here it is.
In case you see it.
Okay.
Okay, we can all see it.
All right, so as I said before, we're looking at 24-0067, draft 3.1, dated today's date 1/10. So first, the short, and this is a committee bill. So the short title of this bill is the Be Home Act. So section 2 is a study placeholder for a building code study, directing someone to identify the rates of adoption of the Federal Emergency Management Agency's flood-resistant building code by Vermont municipalities, as well as recommending strategies to increase the adoption. And then there's an appropriation, again, sort of a placeholder for this.
And we have a building code study that was done this fall, I thought,
So you had a building energy code study, which
So,
is specific
which we're
to,
gonna hear about.
yep, it's specific to the residential and commercial building energy codes. This is about FEMA's flood-resistant building codes and which towns have actually adopted it. So
Got
Good idea.
it. So just because people will hear code study and we are gonna hear about the energy code study.
right, so you will need to make, this is really a skeleton. So if you
Yeah.
want to proceed, you'll need information here.
Yeah, okay, great. Let's cruise to,
All right, so on page 2, section 3 is amending the effective date from the parking section from last year's Home Act. So last year in the Home Act, you passed language regarding parking, directing the municipalities to require not more than 1 parking space per dwelling unit or 1.
Sorry, my bill isn't advancing.
Yeah.
I don't know
we're
if,
gonna need to follow. So we're at section 3.
Sorry,
Yeah.
okay,
Section 3.
so on page 2, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know if
No,
it
that's
froze.
okay. Exactly, you're our scroller here. Okay,
Yeah, so the language is on section 3 is on page 2, and it's just changing the effective date. And as I was saying, this effective date refers back to language that you passed last year regarding how many parking spaces a municipality can require. And so last year, the effective date you passed was December of this year. So this section in section 3 would move that up to July of this year.
I'm happy to hear that there are 3 people who don't want this section to be considered moving forward. It just felt to me like, this one, everyone knows it's coming, and in a lot of cases, it's being very public, high profile cases, it's being weaponized to stop development right now, or to delay development. And I would like to consider us making this as soon as possible, essentially.
I think it would be healthy to have the conversation, no matter what the answer, because
Yes.
it'll give us a chance to talk about implementation, which is so, so important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so further down on page 2 is section 4. So this starts some language related to Act 250. So this first section relates to appeals to the Environmental Division of Act 250 permits. So on page 3, the new language is adding on lines 7 through 9. Until January 1, 2026, the Environmental Division shall issue a decision on a case regarding Chapter 151, so Act 250, within 180 days of the case being filed with the decision. I do want to flag briefly, I have started researching but have not finished. This raises some constitutional concerns. The judiciary is a separate branch. You, as the legislative branch, have some authority to set some parameters on the work that they do. However, I'm not aware of any time the judiciary has allowed you to set deadlines for them.
Get really testy.
So
I would.
there's a potential separation of powers issue there, and so you may want to hear from the judiciary about this.
Right. And this is very much a placeholder. This was to just to look at timeline issues. So it could be, and there are lots of ideas on the table that have bubbled up, limiting to 2 appeals in the municipal process, which Gus Seelig is probably going to propose. Gus Seelig is also proposing a separate housing board of appeals that has clearer guidelines and timelines and is quasi-judicial. I'm worried because he sees that as just being municipal, and we haven't had a chance to talk about that adding potentially more of a cost and burden and extra layer of bureaucracy that rather than reducing it. And we are having the conversation about the appeals bond. So I just want to say, I personally am not married to this. I just wanted us to have a conversation about appeal timeline. And this is where that placeholder is.
Which is, I think, essential. It's the one thing that it's one of maybe a few things, but one of the key things that the NRB's work this summer didn't come to consensus on, and which we all need to really discuss fully, because appeals are huge, and the threat of appeals is a big challenge to the whole system and slows down. I mean, I represent the poster child town for the 10-year delay on appeals and to housing that could have been built much sooner and house people a lot sooner. So I think all of us are very keen on reviewing the appeals process and making some suggestions.
I guess, yes, what I would say is that when someone asks me, how long could these appeals take? I want to be able to give them an upper limit answer. And it's really irresponsible in my mind that we can't do that for people right now.
Right. And we might want to discuss limiting the jurisdiction of appeals too.
Right.
That might be another way to accomplish the goal.
Right.
Okay.
Great, so further down on page 3 is section 5. This is another sort of flag section. So this is about the Supreme Court. So the language here currently reads, the Supreme Court may award damages for project costs caused by delays caused by the appeal to the Supreme Court in a decision regarding a permit issued pursuant to Act 250. The permit holder shall use the damages awarded to cover project costs. So I think that this is also a placeholder. If not, it needs a significant amount of research. This is also raising some constitutional concerns for me. The Vermont Constitution requires the right to an appeal. And so we do want to keep an eye on at what point you're impeding a plaintiff's ability to appeal, if you're either requiring some sort of financial or this language is actually very vague about how a court would even figure out what damages in this situation would be.
Yeah.
And so again, this would need additional work.
This is really looking at, I think it's the European system, where if you sue and you lose, you pay the costs.
That's right.
Right.
There's a lot less suits
As a result.
as a result.
Yeah.
But I think the goal here is to stop frivolous suits. I just don't want it.
Correct.
So I just don't want any change. So I'm going to appeal it.
Right.
And,
If we had that in place now, we would be done with Putney and we'd be building.
I think the appeals bond might be a more elegant solution here. I think other states have probably looked at the same issue of bad faith or frivolous lawsuits. And I think I asked for this before I knew there was such thing as an appeals bond that Wendy raised. And so I don't know if that's a separate section now, Ellen, or we haven't added it.
No, it's not in here.
Okay.
But it's something for us
Yeah,
to
New
chat
Hampshire
about.
does that. Right? I think it was New Hampshire.
Massachusetts, I think, too.
I guess New Hampshire has a whole separate court, but there's
Right.
lots of different ways.
Okay, well, we can
And the
discuss
appeals
that.
bond exists in the House bill. So we could just lift their language for now if we like it.
Okay,
Right. So, yeah.
okay.
So the next section, section 6, is on pages 4 and 5. And I'm not going to read it verbatim unless you would like me to,
No.
but this is establishing on the record appeals for the district commission
Sorry,
process.
I don't see it on 4.
It's all of 4. So the intro section is the last
Oh, I
line,
got it,
page
got it, got it.
3.
Yeah, recorded.
Recorded hearings.
The language is on page 4 and 5. And it establishes the requirement that district commissions in Act 250 cases hold hearings on the record, which is a more formal process that does require physically recording the hearing. And so currently the district commission is not on the record, but that then affects the appeals of district commission decisions. Currently, appeals from the district commission go to the environmental court, which hears the case de novo. And so if the hearings are on the record, the appeal to the environmental court is on the record appeal, which is a different standard. So they review the recorded proceeding, and so it's a more limited appeal.
Which we like.
I think this gets to your transparency question, Senator Harrison. Like right now they're saying we just don't record it. We can't.
Yes, it's great. I look forward to this conversation.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go through the language verbatim?
I think at this point we're doing, correct me if I'm wrong, Chair.
No, that's fine.
I think
And-
we're just doing an introduction.
And
Where we are.
Ellen, would it be fair to say that this language has been considered by the legislature before, or there's been a change in this language from past consideration of de novo to on the record?
Yeah, I took this language from a prior bill, and I didn't necessarily change it in any way, just how to establish on the record appeals.
So when we do talk about it, it would be helpful to know why they chose not to go this way.
Initially, I mean.
Whatever legislature considered this, or whoever considers this.
I'm sure we'll have.
I don't know if I'd be able to give you that. I will say that 20 years ago, I think there was actually a bill passed that established a formal study committee to look at on the record review for Act 250, and so I do think that report exists. I think it was in 2005. So we may be able to find that.
And if it's that old, maybe it's not relevant.
So it has been considered, because there was a
Yes.
pilot done, I believe, to have at least, I think it was like 1 or 2 district commissions tested it out.
Okay,
So we may be able to get that.
thank you.
Yeah. And so that language does continue onto page 6. And then on page 6, section 8 starts. And so sections 8 through 13 are an entirely different topic. And this is language establishing a housing board of appeals. It is, I based it very closely on the New Hampshire model. Representative Stevens has introduced H647, which is similar to this, though there's a few small changes that he made to it. But the Housing Board of Appeals in New Hampshire is a 3-member board of lay people. They are appointed by the Supreme Court. At least one of them has to be a lawyer, and then the other 2 are supposed to have background in engineering, housing, land things. And so they're appointed by the Supreme Court for a term of 5 years, and they have, it establishes in the law that people who have been issued a permit by the municipality for housing have the option to go to have any appeals brought to the Housing Board of Appeal rather than the court. And so that's how this language is established, is it sets up the option to choose to go to the Housing Board of Appeals.
Rather than e-court.
Rather than the court,
And
yes.
who makes that
The appellant, the one who is actually bringing the appeal.
Okay.
So it could be the person seeking the permit if they were denied, or it could be an opponent to the project who wants to bring an appeal.
Okay. Thank you.
And this works successfully now in New Hampshire. Any other places? This is what Gus Seelig first raised with us
It's
last
also,
year.
as Gus explained it to me, if you don't get your answer or decision within X number of days, the permit is granted, considered granted.
Yeah, so there aren't timelines in here for the board. So that is a difference between going to the court, because this is a creature of the legislature, as we say. This is a quasi-judicial board established by the legislature. You do have more direct control over how they work as opposed to the court. So yes. So that's the basic information about it. I can give you some more information. They're treated like judges, so they're paid the same rate as judges. So here, that's $167,000 a year. So that's a thing you need to consider. 3 of them would be about $500,000. The New Hampshire board uses the Supreme Court to make appointments. I'm not aware of Vermont using the Supreme Court to make appointments any other way, but that's an option that you do have if you want to, or you could choose a different body to appoint them.
You could have the side judges do it.
You
No,
have
maybe
lots
not.
of options.
Maybe not.
You do want to, so I had highlighted in here a couple of things that I just found are sort of differences with Vermont law than with New Hampshire law that are just things to sort of pay attention to. They have temporary members if there's a disqualification. I think, we don't really have anything like that except for under Act 250. There are alternates who are available. So you do want to consider that. But yes, as I have drafted it, it's any appeal of a municipal zoning permit, subdivision, variance, or other municipal permit related to housing and housing development, including mixed-use development.
Sorry, and that's on page.
And it's municipal, I'm sorry.
The language I was just referencing is at the bottom of page 7 into 8.
Yeah, I'm
but
just finding it.
jumping
Yeah,
around.
got it.
But if we're doing this with the purpose of trying to limit basically nuisance appeals, people that just don't want it to happen, and so they'll just drag it out in hoping that they'll do that. If the person or persons who are bringing that appeal have the choice of going to the courts, then that's just gonna drag it out. That's not gonna solve our problem of trying to limit those. And I don't know, I have a feeling we can't say you can't go to court if we are
So-
guaranteed the right of appeal.
Actually, so Representative Stevens' bill does actually dictate that a housing appeal has to go to the Housing Board of Appeals.
Oh,
That is, I'm so far
Okay.
pretty sure that still qualifies as having an appeal, because the appeal from that body is to the Supreme Court. So do establish
Okay.
that in here. So,
oh, so you go to that body, but then you could still go to the Supreme Court, which
yes.
works in
Well,
the favor
Not
of
sure
someone
who did that.
trying to
Right.
have
And
that it-
in New Hampshire, can they go to the Supreme Court?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
Originally,
I believe so, yes.
it's either the Supreme Court Or is there an appeal from the housing board in New Hampshire?
I believe so. I copied the language pretty closely. I can go back and check, but I'm pretty sure.
So anybody that wants to drag it out can drag it out.
Yeah, and I think we want to limit the dragging out. I mean, I just think it doesn't benefit anybody. It just, I mean.
Magali, we can see your LinkedIn detective work right now.
I'm trying, sorry.
No, it's okay.
First day. Listen, we all did this during COVID.
I think Magali, if you pull that tab out and make it its own and keep it on that, I think you could do other work but we are on a different page now.
Thank you, sorry about that.
So, where are we going next, Ellen?
I was trying to see what I set as the deadlines in here. So they have to hold a hearing on any case filed with them within 90 days and then have to make a decision within 60 days after that. So it's 30 days from the date of the municipal decision, then a hearing within 90 days, and then the decision within 60 days. So that's 180 days to get a decision from this body.
That's a doozy.
And then, yeah, there's lots of things to consider with this body because we don't really have anything like this. So you may want to consider.
It's all
new.
new.
It's all new. Do they need to have an office and an established hearing space? Should they go to the places where these appeals are to hear them? How much staff do they need?
It's getting expensive.
Right. So 3 members at the rate of a judge is $500,000. I put in here one attorney for them, but they probably are going to need a clerk, some administrative staff, and an office. So you're going to need to think through those things.
So we can let Gus defend this notion. You know, he's passionate about it. So I'm going to give him time to talk in our committee. But we'd probably let a lot of that other thinking happen in House General if we don't have the time to dig into this one.
And are they at the moment taking this up first, Keisha?
To my knowledge, they are. Gus really wanted to make sure we're thinking about it early on in our menu of appeals options. But I believe Representative Stevens is maybe making this a priority. I could be wrong. This one piece.
There is the Transportation Board, the T-Board, that does hear appeals. So I don't know if that might be something to look at.
So there's another body that already does this.
Right, and then I sit on that board, and we're certainly not paid like this. But it's a very limited area of decisions, but this is a very limited area of decisions too. So there might be some relevancy there because people can, if they're not happy with what we do, they go to the Superior Court.
Well, one of the reasons that this is up is we hear a lot about Act 250, that generally Act 250 decisions are approved relatively quickly, except in those cases in which there's an appeal. But where there's an appeal, the average time is a year. And what I'm hearing here is we can add this board at a substantial cost and aggravation, and we'd get it done in 6 months. That isn't enough that doesn't motivate me a whole lot to be enthusiastic about this, at least as it reads.
Well, we're gonna let Gus excite us. So, I mean, I think that's Gus's job to have us convinced that it cuts. I mean, it cuts it in half, and then they could still appeal to the Supreme Court, right? So it's it's not like it's 6 months and done. So.
But that's why we might want to reduce what is appealable.
So are your decisions in Transportation Board able to be appealed to the Supreme Court?
Yes.
Yeah. How many are, do you know? Some.
But we're much less expensive than this.
So the last two, there's 2 more concepts in this bill. So at the very bottom of page 16, and then the language is on 17 through 19. This is the wastewater connection permit language that you have looked at every year since I started. And I did just want to flag, and it's highlighted, is that last year in the Home Act, Section 25 of the Home Act did direct ANR to review their wastewater permits for duplication and
Right.
report back next January. January of 2025. So I have that language if you want to hear about it, but it really, I think, was, and you did direct ANR to see how much they could already do without any additional statutory authority to reduce duplication.
And is that report in from them?
It's due next year.
Oh, to next year.
Yes, but I will say also, this year ANR did update their wastewater rule and they did reduce some duplication in it. So you may want to hear from them regardless
Yes.
about the
Yeah.
steps they did already take.
We will
Great.
hear from them.
I believe they're coming in Friday because now all of the administration departments and agencies working on housing are going together to things.
We don't have enough chairs from all, but anyway, there we are.
Thanks for highlighting that in the. That's very helpful.
And then finally, the language is on page 19 through the end. Section 16 is a land bank study. And again, this is a skeleton study.
Didn't we do this? I thought we did this.
It's been talked
No.
about. I don't
I don't believe that you actually passed anything on it.
Oh, I thought we did.
And
Okay.
so this is the only language I actually found on it. And it is a mostly blank study.
Yeah, oh, really?
None of the membership has been decided.
A
or
blank
anything.
canvas.
Yes. So this would direct a committee to review and consider models for creating municipal or regional land banks, the purpose of which are to acquire and transfer for the purpose of revitalizing blighted properties and underperforming real estate assets in communities.
Sorry, Magali, I don't want people to get confused because what we have up is the Housing Board of Appeals. So I don't want
Yes,
people
we need
to get
Sorry.
confused.
We're on page 19.
We're on page
Yeah.
19. Sorry, I was,
Yeah, right here. So this is,
right.
yeah. And so if you do work on this, this would probably be John as opposed to me, but again, this is sort of just a skeleton.
And
I
a
would say
land
I
bank.
sort of. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
Wendy.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I had really let this go because what most people had said, I think even what David Hall said previously, was a municipality can do this. They just have to marshal the tools themselves. Like the tools are there for them, but you know, they're scattered and it's not necessarily organized under an umbrella like land banks. And I let it go, but then, you know, many people have raised how valuable land banks would be in a transparent municipal conversation for future movement out of floodplains. So I just wanted to see if anybody wanted to champion this again from a flood impacted area.
And I think they come into play in flood recovery in a big way.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a good timing for us to review this again because we're looking at some of the committees that we have talked to and ones we haven't talked to yet, but who are looking at exactly this thing. If we want to move a house or a mobile home out of the floodplain, where are we putting it? How are we going to develop land within our community or our region where safe land that we can move people to? So this is, I think, an important conversation for us to have right now. And then there's lots that still, so is that the last piece that we have in this draft? So we have lots of other things that we're talking about putting into this draft, right? Or into this bill, which I hope we will be looking at. Kay, should you have some thoughts on some of the additional pieces? Because I would hope that we would include the stuff John has drafted.
We have,
Holly, you can-
yes. I have additional pieces that I've written down that I have witnesses for. And everyone on this committee should maybe have an hour to bring in witnesses, present pieces that they want to include. I'm hoping in the next 2 weeks, we can get all the ideas on the table and drafted. Some are already in the House bill. I was hoping Representative Bongartz would be free to share the work he did out of session with us, because a lot of it was where I wanted to put that placeholder around flood code and, you know, kind of a cohesive sense of flood related responsibility in development. But I don't know that to be true, but I think there could be many pieces added to this. And I just encourage everyone to work with me and Magali on setting aside a half hour if it's a one-off, or an hour if you have lots of pieces that you want to propose.
As you know, I've had John draft up what became very important in Barry and in all the flooded towns, if they had a rental registry, was the rental registry. I've asked John, it's all drafted, the rental registry and the short-term rental piece. I think we need to address that in part this year in the housing bill. So those pieces are drafted up. We've only, at the moment, the short-term rental piece is only bringing it up to the level playing field of requiring the same health and safety standards as every other lodging establishment. And the rental registry for the towns and cities that don't already have them. So
right, and those are actually
that's drafted and ready to be popped in if you know. At the moment.
So we'd want to hear anyone who has something they've been working with John on, for example. Maybe we spend an hour with John on those proposals. And Maura Collins, I would say, is one of our more helpful stakeholder experts on those two pieces, because she's sort of tried to figure out how to make those as seamless as possible, or she has data on short-term rentals, et cetera. So if we do hear from her today, that should help.
She's at the moment still stuck up, and not stuck. She's testifying productively in House General. So she's still upstairs.
And I need to go upstairs.
Yes.
And needs to go upstairs. So we're going to be ending, I think, in about 5 minutes. Is there any other thoughts just initially on, I've just shared the other additional piece I was sort of hoping we were going to take up is evictions, and some of any work that we had wanted to do on also on transparency with landlords and buyers of things in the floodplain. And there's some flood recovery housing stuff that I think we want to make sure we put in here as well.
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Anne. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when there was talk about taxing short-term rentals, I got a lot of emails and phone calls. And so I emailed them all back and said, so why do you choose to do a short term when you could do a long term? And every one of them said it takes too long and it's too expensive to get rid of a bad tenant. And I think if we're going to look at that, we do need to look at our landlord tenant laws. We don't think we've done them since my last stint in here, which was over 10 years ago. It is one of the most contentious things you can do, but
you're right.
If you've got a tenant that's not paying you rent, and it's November and you can't evict them until March or April.
So maybe actually one of the things we want to do in this is ask for a task force reviewing the landlord tenant laws and come back to us with a way to update them. Well, I don't think we're going to have time to actually go through them because they're huge.
It is, and it's very difficult.
It is, and I think it needs to be done because it's a big barrier for some people to go into long-term rentals.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So,
and they're working on it already.
Oh, okay.
That's on the list. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you go.
And then just mobile homes. We have a
mobile
task
homes.
force.
Mm-hmm.
I think
That's being scheduled.
So if that would be part of this bill, and
so
things
we've
that
got
come out of that study.
rental registry, short-term rental.
Yes. So I'll just say as a preview, all of those things we're looking for testimony. We're getting scheduled. In addition, on eviction issues, the House is looking again at eviction mediation and diversion. So I'm remaining open to that. I have a piece that I'd like us to look at about rental payments being placed on someone's credit score, optionally, but
Yeah.
credit. My entry into the eviction issue was going to be to get our Section 8 folks in, people who have Section 8 tenants, people on Section 8, people who manage the program, because we are leaving a lot of federal dollars on the table from people that don't want to accept Section 8 tenants. And many of them are saying they're afraid of taking a chance on somebody, of what the process would be for them. So I'd like us to look at eviction, but we're going to have to take a pretty holistic look, and it may extend past this bill's passage.
We could maybe continue to work on it and add it to bills that came our way.
Exactly.
Just saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
I think landlord tenant law will have to travel separately, I'd say. There are some fixes to the Home Act that we need to look at. And without going into too much detail, I just want to put on everyone's radar, January 17th is our joint hearing with Health and Welfare and Judiciary on public safety in housing and in downtowns, and the economic impact that public safety issues are having. And we did just set January 24th for a joint hearing with Natural Resources on Housing Act 250 and flood recovery.
Maybe it would, yeah, well, we can chat further about this. I don't think, I think we could consider, solving and putting a solution on the table for the landlord tenant piece is a lot to ask for this year, but I do think we could trigger a review of it and coming up with some solutions to how to improve things.
Right.
Kind of study.
I think the rental registry and maybe that credit score piece would still be a win. That would be a big change.
I completely agree. The credit score piece I think is terrific. Right.
And homelessness as, impact as shelters, that's a different committee, right? We're working on overall.
No, I don't think it's different.
So then we need to, those conversations are happening now.
The reason AHS is traveling with ACCD and ANR is because, like us, the administration wants to see all of those conversations happen together. So that's why we're having a joint hearing, and that's why we're hearing from those three agencies at the same time, is because we can't afford to have them be siloed conversations.
Okay, good.
This credit score issue that was raised, what's the intent there?
Oh, the credit score issue. So this is something our housing trusts already do, and it's been made possible by like a Forbes 500 company out of Minnesota that creates a very nominal fee for a landlord to pay that transfers their tenants' rental payments onto their credit score. So it's seen as a kind of market-based way to help people build equity, because right now it's often someone's only payment that they're making regularly, and it doesn't get counted for building their credit.
Right. It's an additional way to establish credit and improve your credit score if you don't necessarily own a car or if you don't own a lot of other stuff, and you get credit for being a timely payer on your rent. It's one, I agree, it's a good way to build additional.
So it's something that is optional for a landlord to use, but there's nothing mandatory about it, I'm assuming?
I'd like to just explore understanding what would be helpful in this case. Right now, I think there's not even enough awareness that it exists. And if we could have some good actors in the landlord world take that on, that would be great. I also think enough of the landlord world knows that other things could come from the house that make their lives a lot more difficult, and that this might be a way to act in good faith and be helpful in our housing shortage and our, notion of building more home ownership. So, it's just an idea to put on the table. If it doesn't pass this year, we'll have gathered information. But, I think it's good for us.
I'm just trying to understand and what we would do with it and why it would be in a bill that we would use.
Yeah, so the end result could be having landlords sign up for this and making sure that people have the option to have their rent included on their credit score through their landlord.
But is there something contemplated here that this would be a standard that we would expect landlord to use, and there would be something adverse to them that we would do if they don't, if they evaluated credit in some other way?
I don't think there's anything adverse we would do. I've talked to the treasurer because we're looking at piloting it to see what mechanism we can make available as an incentive. You know, so we're not, I think the end result this year wouldn't be a mandate. It would be talking to the treasurer about like, how do we create this financial mechanism and raise awareness about it so that more people can build credit.
Well, I would just be very, very careful that if in the event that we get involved with something that measures credit, that we don't interpose ourselves as requiring that be the determinant of credit, when I think it should be up to a landlord to decide the credit worthiness of anybody that they do business with without our intervention.
Yeah,
So-
but I think it's also fair that if somebody pays their rent on time,
But if they don't pay anybody else on time, that is a clue.
but
And I
that's
think
okay,
the
that will be
landlords-
reflected.
Yeah, well, not necessarily reflected there. It may be reflected in some other mechanism that the landlord already uses.
No, it
But
will
I
be
think,
reflected on.
Bandy, this would be in a way a much less punitive and a much more market-driven way to get at that. And we may see proposals come from elsewhere outside of our committee to reduce the use of credit as a tool. So I think this would be something we should explore in advance of that.
I'm just very concerned about our intervening in decisions as to whether or not something meets a particular landlord's credit requirements.
That would not be part of our bill. That may come up in other forums. And I think our best answer to that is we're trying to help people build credit with the thing they usually pay on time. So it would be an answer to those who instead want to take tools away from landlords.
Take tools away. Who's trying to take tools away from landlords?
What you're saying
I'm trying to
is something
understand what
I would
problem
avoid.
you're trying to solve.
We're trying to solve the problem that many renters don't necessarily have the things that they need on their credit scores, that, you know, people get dinged for all kinds of non-timely payments, but they don't get any credit for the biggest payment they make every month. That somehow that is left off credit score calculations, and that's a kind of class-based issue that's never been counted as something of value, even though it's most likely to be someone's most consistent payment.
I see what you're saying.
No, okay, well, we're gonna discuss it further. And I think the objective, you know, I think we need to be clear on what we're trying to accomplish. What we're trying to accomplish is enabling people to build a credit score on something that's not even considered now in their credit score. Isn't that right? I mean, that's what we're simply trying to do.
It's not it's not a punitive thing. It's not taking
No.
a tool away from the landlord.
It's enabling for people with less means, I think, to help build credit scores.
Mhm.
Okay, I think this is terrific, and I think unless there's something else for Ellen at the moment, we're gonna end early and give people a little bit longer. The press conference is at noon?
Yes, I believe in the ceremonial hours. So you're all welcome to attend.
Well, yes, do you have a subject? What is the subject you're addressing?
The subject is reactions to the governor's State of the State message. In particular, we're talking about housing and other things.
Okay,
This
So-
is what I'm talking about.
yeah.
What I assume Keisha's talking about.
It's about what we're gonna do about housing, but moving forward, essentially.
Okay, because the response to the State of the State might be a little different.
Right.
But
So
focusing-
my understanding is we're talking about our housing bills, our proposals, how we hear Vermonters that they need housing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Terrific. Great. Thank you. Well, thank you all. I think we're going to adjourn at this moment, and we will convene again tomorrow morning at 9 or 8:30? 9. 9:30. Stephanie Smith. I feel like we have.
That's an older version.
Okay, great. We're
So
going to
it's
be
not
back
9:30.
at 9.
It's
Great.
updated on the website.